bell did ring. Never mind. I don't know. My computer clock is way different than the bell, so I don't actually know. You're fine. Just sit down, grab your stuff. I'm assuming of how many people are in the hall. Yep, I know. Alright.
Why is everybody wearing this?
Because it's Wacky Wednesday.
Do you have my kids in math class? Do you have my dad? Genius.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, what should we be working on?
Martin King Jr.
What should we be working on? Right now? No, warm up.
That's why Martin King Jr.
Yes, grab your green sheet. Grab your green sheet. You can at least write and tell me you don't know anything.
My friends like Sharpie.
If you don't know, we'll learn.
So we just write really
That's it. Have a seat, sir. Just have a seat. Just have a seat. All right. Alright, so today's due now. Talking a little bit about Martin Luther King Jr. What do you know about him? Okay? It's okay if you don't know very much, right? That's kind of why we're in school, right? We're here to learn. And then just like I'm gonna give a couple people a little more time to answer. You might be going later. Just focus on now. And then the second question, how do you think, if you know something about him, how do you think he might connect with our discussion on making a difference in our community? Even if you don't know anything about him, how do you think he might connect to our discussion today? So even if you don't know anything about him, maybe make a good educated guess as to how he might connect with our discussion on making a difference in our community. So what do you think if you don't know anything about him, what do you think he did based on what we talked about on Monday? Alright, so I should see some sentences written down. If you're done, just hang on just a second, we'll get there, okay? I want to give everybody a couple more minutes to finish their sentences. Couple more people are finishing. Linda, you had your hand up. Do you want to share? He did. Yeah, he did. He did. And we'll talk about why today. We'll talk about that today. We'll talk about it today. Even if you don't know why, we'll talk about it today. Okay, we'll talk about that. Anybody else have any other ideas? Or maybe the second question I put up there. How do you think he connects with our discussion on making a difference in our community. How do you think he connects? Why do you think I'm talking about it? Okay, maybe. Okay. How else do you think he connects with our discussion that we started? He was the first person to say that everybody, no matter what color their skin is, so they have to connect, they have to make connections in their community. Okay, good guess. All right, we'll see how close some of you are later today. And it's okay. For those of you that don't know, it's okay. Okay? Some of you might know a little bit, and some of you might not, and that's okay. All right. If you are done, put your green sheets in your folders. All right, put your green sheets in your folders. All right, remember today Monday, we talked about our statement of inquiry. When interacting with people in the community, structure, form, and function are key to a successful exchange of ideas and information. Remember we talked about how people in the community, when we connect with other people, we share our ideas, we share our opinions, we share lots of things when we live in community with people. And so remember, these are our 3 questions we're thinking about as we go through this unit. Okay, remember we're asking, how can I make a difference? And then how do people change our world? So that one we're going to talk about today a little bit through Martin Luther King Jr. And then the question that I asked on Monday, remember we talked about superheroes, how superheroes save the day. And then talking about how even though some of our superheroes like Superman and Batman aren't real, we actually have heroes in our communities every single day. And we'll talk about that too. Alright, so the question we're going to focus on is what makes a hero? Answering that question. Okay. Alright, so we are going to do a few different activities today to start understanding who was Martin Luther King Jr. And so first, before we do this, I want to talk about this word, biography. So do we remember, we talked a little bit about biographies before. Do you guys remember what a biography is? It's here. Tell me.
Is it something that's true?
Yep, it is a true story. It's real life, yeah. Yep, okay. Hamdi? Kind of telling about their timeline. Yep, something to do with their life, right? Something important. Usually a biography includes important things that people did. Yep. So a biography, if you look up here, a biography tells about important events in a person's life. It usually tells the whole story. Yep. And a biography is nonfiction, which Yasir said, right? True. And then this biography tells about Martin Luther King Jr. All right, so we are going to be talking a little bit about civil rights. Before we get started, do you guys know what civil rights are? When I say civil rights, have you heard it ever? Actually, raise your hand if you've ever heard of the word civil rights. Okay, we've heard of the word. Do we know what it means? Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to be learning a little bit about some of these on here. We're probably going to make a chart like that either later today or on Friday. We're going to keep talking about this on Friday. But civil rights have to do with voting and being able to do things, having the freedom to do it. And then Yeah, there was just really, it's an important thing to talk about. And so Martin Luther King Jr. was all about civil rights. That was what he really wanted to focus on. So we're gonna, if I can find the right, that one. There we go. All right. There we go. Takes a little bit to get there. All right. So, talking about this question, who was Martin Luther King Jr.? My smart board has not been behaving at all today. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to put up full just one page. So this, one of the words that you're going to see in this story is protests and peaceful protests connected with civil rights. Okay? So it says down here, in 1963, Alabama's laws kept black people from voting. Okay? Martin Luther King Jr. led a march to protest or complain about those laws. So a peaceful protest is a protest. It's a group of people that are complaining about something. They aren't hurting anybody or doing anything to anybody's stuff. It's just a group of people walking together usually to say, you know what, I don't agree with this. I don't think this is right. So that's what a peaceful protest is, and we're going to talk about that later in the book because Martin Luther King Jr. was involved with those peaceful protests. And then the other thing we're going to talk about, free speech and voting. So free speech was something that is a right that we were given by the United States. It's in the Constitution. So if you guys remember from Constitution Day in your homerooms a couple weeks ago, we talked about those rights that we were given in the Constitution. The freedom of speech is one of those rights that we were given as Americans. And so Martin Luther King Jr. used that ability to say what he thought, that freedom of speech, to speak out for voting rights for Black Americans. So he used that freedom to say, you know what, I think it's wrong that you're saying that Black Americans can't vote. And so he used that ability to do that. And then voting, talking about voting. This is something I'm sure you kind of have been hearing a little bit in the news, right? Because this is an election year. We've got a presidential election coming up. And people are going to vote. And that was actually something that Black Americans couldn't always do. They couldn't always vote. That was something that they didn't have the right to. And so Black people won the right to vote, and now voting is one of the civil rights of every American. So we're going to hear a little bit about that too. But those are some key words that I wanted to make sure we talked about before we got further in. All right, for the first thing to know, who was Martin Luther King Jr.? Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929. He was a child from the South. When you hear the word the South, what does that mean? What does it mean, the South? The South part of what? Say again?
Country.
Yeah, the South part of the country, right? It's the South part of the United States. So if you think about the map of the United States, this has got the whole world on it. But if we think about the United States over here, the South part is right down here. So he was from the South. He grew up in the 1930s. At that time, Black families could not live in white neighborhoods. It meant that Black families had a specific place that they had to live, and they couldn't live outside of that area. Or they couldn't live where white people lived. And that's kind of how it was. in addition to that, black people could not eat in restaurants with white people. That was actually a rule. There were rules that were in place that they said black people can't eat in restaurants with white people. Yep, it says white only. You notice, good noticing of that in that picture. Yeah, it says white only. So that was a restaurant that only white people could go and eat. And notice in this picture, are there any white kids in this picture?
No.
So black children could not attend white schools. They had different schools, they had different places that they could go and eat and work. And they couldn't all go to the same school. So Martin Luther King Jr. was a minister like his father. So what does a minister do? What does that word minister mean? Not a president, minister. Do you know what that means? So another word for minister is pastor. Does that help? So a pastor works in a church. So he was a church leader. Okay? Yep, so he was a church leader. His father and his grandfather were both pastors that worked in churches. So they spoke to people every Sunday. Oh my goodness. He was also a husband and the father of 4 children. So it says down here, Martin married Coretta Scott in 1963. Martin and Coretta had 4 children, Yolanda, Martin, Dexter, and Bernice. So he had 4 kids, and his wife's name was Coretta. He was a follower. He followed the teachings of his church. So he believed all of the same things that were spoken at the church. Martin was a leader. He led his people in the fight for civil rights. So we talked a little bit about this before we got started. Civil rights are those basic freedoms that we have, the right to vote and other things. And so he led his people in the fight for civil rights. So at the time, so like we talked about at the very beginning, right? People couldn't go eat in the same restaurant as white people. They couldn't go the same place. They couldn't live the same places. They couldn't go to the same school. And so Martin Luther King Jr. didn't think that was right, and so that was what he fought against. He led his people toward a better future. It says in Washington, D.C. in 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This new law prohibited job discrimination and gave all people the right to use all public places. So this Civil Rights Act, what did this Civil Rights Act do? So it gave people, yeah, so what did that mean? Yeah, so it didn't matter what color your skin was, you could go wherever you wanted to if it was a public place. So like a restaurant or school, all of those things, it gave them that right. Martin Luther was a man who was not afraid to suffer for what he believed in. He was threatened. So that was something that was really hard. Do you think everybody that lived in the United States at the time believed in everything that Martin Luther said?
No.
Why not?
Because white and black.
Okay, so maybe they thought white and black were separate. Okay, why else do you think? Why do you think people didn't like him so much? Need a couple minutes to think? You need a couple minutes to think? Okay. Okay, I'll come back to you.
He wants the white and black people together.
Yeah, he wanted them them to be together. He wanted them to be the same. And do you think that bothered people a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because part of that reason was that them being separate was the way it had been for a really long time. And so that idea of being together was new. He was arrested. Yeah. He was arrested in Birmingham, Alabama. Martin was put in jail for protesting. So remember what did we say protesting meant?
No, voting.
Yep, you don't agree. So you stand up and say something, right? So protesting means you're disagreeing by doing something. So usually it's like a march, or sometimes people will stand outside and hold up signs and try to get other people to agree with them. So that was something that Martin Luther King Jr. did a lot. He protested a lot, and he got arrested. He was hated. So some people said really mean, nasty things to him. But he was also loved. Lots and lots and lots of people loved him. Say it again?
Black people loved him and white people hated him.
And that was generally the case, although there were some people, some white people that did really love him too, and they believed in what he was saying. Yeah, President Johnson definitely had to believe in him to some extent to pass that law. He was a great speaker. That's something else that Martin Luther King Jr. was very good at. He was a very good speaker. And that's part of the reason people listened to him. He spoke out against hate and against violence. So the police sprayed protesters with a fire hose. That was something so there were some really, really not good things happening. So when these African American people were protesting, sometimes they would get sprayed with water, they'd get arrested. There was just a lot of really bad stuff going on. And so he spoke out against that hate and against that violence. He said, that's not right. That's not right to treat people this way. He also spoke about his hopes and his dreams. So this is a picture actually from a march on Washington. Okay, so he went and he spoke in Washington, D.C., where the Capitol is. He spoke and he made this amazing speech about how he had this dream for America and what America would look like.
He got shot.
Not yet. He did later, but not yet. At this speech, no. And this is part of his speech, and I really want us to think about this, and we're going to talk about this later.
I have a dream.
Yep, so that's a lot of people, when they hear that phrase, that's who it was. It was Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So what does that mean, content of their character? Yeah, how they act, how they treat other people. Without judging them, yeah. Not judging them based on what color their skin is, but also how they treat other people, how they act. He spoke for peace. That was something he really, really wanted. He wanted peace between people, no matter what color their skin was. Super important to him. He actually received the Nobel Peace Prize. So this is actually an award that's given out to people that really promote peace, no matter where they are or where they live. And so he was given that award, and it's a really, really important award. Martin was a hero. He died for what he believed in. So in Memphis, Tennessee, on April 4th, 1968, so a few years after he gave that really big speech, a man shot and killed him. So we talked a little bit about that, where a couple of you knew that. So it was a really, really, really sad thing.
like, is Martin Luther King kid still alive?
I don't know if his kids are still alive. I would think so. I think so, yeah. Because he died in 1968. He was only 39 at the time. So his kids were probably pretty young when he died.
14.
So this is a picture of his funeral procession. So lots and lots and lots of people came to his funeral because they believed in him. They believed in what he was doing. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great American, and he is never forgotten. They have this statue of him up, and we actually have a holiday. We have Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We celebrate the things that he did.
What month did he die?
He died in April. All right, we got a video we're going to watch, and it kind of talks about what we just read through, right? Okay. Yep, it's a brain pop video. It's pretty awesome.
I watched those in third grade.
Yes, sir.
And four again. So on board. Yesterday or just 2 times?
No, I think Martin Luther King Jr. Day is on Monday because I think it's a set day every year. All right. All right.
Dear Tim and Mo, can you do a Martin Luther King movie? Thanks, Sarah. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the most important leader of the American Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement was about having universal rights for all people, regardless of gender, income, or skin color. It's hard to believe, but America in the first half of the 20th century was a very different place. In many parts of the country, black people weren't allowed to eat at the same lunch table, go to the same schools, or even use the same bathrooms as white people.
What?
This practice of separating blacks and whites was called segregation.
I'm going to pause it really quick. So, segregation is a really important word that I really want you to understand. So, segregation is that separating of different people based on something specific, like the color of your skin or something like that. So that was segregation. It was something that happened then, and sometimes it still happens today. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that too.
Well, no, and that's the astonishing thing. It was all legal under the Jim Crow laws, a set of rules governing how blacks and whites were allowed to mix. Martin Luther King Jr. grew up in the midst of all that inequality. He was born in 1929 to a middle-class family in Atlanta, Georgia. Both his grandfather and his father were pastors at a local church. King attended religious colleges in Philadelphia and Boston. He was inspired by Northern society's more liberal views of race. Well,
Okay, really quickly. So the North and the South were very different during this time. The North, blacks and whites mixed a little bit more than in the South. Why do you think that is? Some of you have talked about history. What happened in the South that was different in the North? Maybe not. Maybe more people moved to the North.
Did the South have segregation?
Okay, the South had segregation. Can you think of what happened in history? What was in the South that was different in the North? Do you remember? Can you think of the Civil War? Have you guys talked about the Civil War at all in history?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? What was in the South? What did they do with African Americans in the South? What were they? Remember?
Nope.
Arrested. Do you guys remember talking in your history classes about slavery in the South?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think in the South, because slavery used to be a thing in the South, do you think that had something to do with this? Yep, Harriet Tubman in the Civil War and the Underground Railroad, right? So that was part of the reason in the North they didn't have as much segregation because in the North they didn't think slavery was right. But in the South, before the Civil War, they did. They had slavery.
Well, black people and white people mixed a little more freely there than in the South. Dr. King returned to the South and moved to Montgomery, Alabama with his wife Coretta in 1953. He became a pastor and a community leader. When a local woman, Rosa Parks, was arrested for refusing to give her bus seat to a white man, King organized a boycott of the Montgomery bus system.
I'm gonna stop it right there. So Rosa Parks was a really important person in this whole thing. She, at the time, if you were a black person, you had to give up your seat for any white person that would get on the bus. So it had to do with segregation and being less than equal. And so Rosa Parks did something very brave. There was a white man that got on the bus and she wouldn't give him her seat. She said, "No, I'm not going to give you my seat." And that was a really big deal. And she got arrested. And so it started this whole thing with the buses in Montgomery, Alabama. And a boycott is connected to protesting. A boycott is when you stop using something, or you stop doing something, or you stop buying something because you don't agree with it. So Martin Luther King Jr. got all these people together and said, how about let's just stop riding the buses because it isn't fair. So that was part of that.
Most black citizens of Montgomery refused to ride the buses for over a year. The boycott helped bring about a change, and in 1956, a Supreme Court decision banned segregated buses. After that victory, King helped organize a group of churches dedicated to nonviolent protests for civil rights. Dr. King was inspired by the life of Mahatma Gandhi, whose nonviolent leadership helped free India from British rule.